Hi, my name is Guy Lawrence and thanks for tuning into my podcast today. If you're enjoying these conversations and you want to check out more of this transformational work, be sure to come back to guylawrence.com.au and join me as we go further down the rabbit hole. Enjoy the show. Brent, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I gotta say, I'm for anyone on video, I'm looking behind you. When you turn the camera on, I'm just like, that looks amazing. Maybe it's a good place to start. Just explain where you're sitting right now.
I'm in my new office, actually, which is our boxing club. So, just this week I announced that I've gone full-time into boxing coaching, and which has always been my passion. Left a business that I wasn't that happy with, and this is my office. This is where I feel at home. This is the sweat and the smell. It's just the home.
Yeah, you see the boxing ring right behind you, and it looks like a fun office. You know,
Yep.
and my question, I always start with everyone on the show: if a stranger stopped you on the street and asked you what you did for a living, right now you'd be saying a boxing coach, which is phenomenal.
It is, but if you had asked me a week ago, I would have been a business owner, project manager, slash stressed business owner. So it's a little bit different this week.
There's been a lot of shifts going on in your life, and I obviously have gotten to know you over the last year, Brent, just under a year, and invited you to come on to share today, which is really wonderful. So I'm very grateful for you coming on. And you know, before we start going back in time a little bit, you mentioned about a 1-year anniversary. Pretty much, you said it's ironic that I'm inviting you on, and the podcast is today. Do you want to share a little bit about that, mate?
Yeah, sure. So it's almost 12 months to the day. March last year, I went to a business do that I had a great time at, but obviously partook in the demon drink a little bit. And the days after that, the following day, I was just an absolute wreck. And probably for 3, 4, 5 days, I was absolutely shattered. And I was having to come down I was running a business at the time. We had all our staff and we had projects on. Plus I was running a boxing gym and with the kids and everything. And I just woke up on the Monday. Sunday was the hangover. Monday I woke up and I just thought, I can't keep doing this. If I'm expected to help other people, how come I can't help myself? So that's really where my journey kicked into high gear. 12 months ago, almost to the day, I just basically fell apart. I was at probably the darkest stage of my life I've ever been in. You know, my wife noticed it, my daughter noticed it, and I just said, just got to let me be for a few days till I can sort myself out. But you know, almost 12 months to the day, I was a completely different person. I absolutely shattered. I was probably 10 kilos heavier. My life wasn't that flash. And here I am trying to teach kids and people how to do the right thing and be a good person and do all the right things with your life and your health. And I wasn't living any of it. So so it's been a massive 2 months. It's been a massive probably 2 years actually for me.
Yeah. With looking back, before you sort of came across our work, hindsight's a beautiful thing, and now we can look back with reflection, especially when we start to overcome ourselves in different areas. What were now starting to look back, what were the things do you think you were resisting that unconsciously that drove you to that point, to that dark place in the first place?
I think, and it's always a word that comes up very strongly with me, I think I've always resisted being vulnerable. And vulnerability was probably the absolute key word. It still rolls now. I make sure that every day, if I'm feeling vulnerable now, that I check it in and do something about it. But for so many years, I just wasn't vulnerable. It's a simple, and it's hard for blokes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 100 kilos, and I've knocked around a bit. So you're supposed to be the tough guy, and just turning that persona back to that vulnerable point that, you know, I had as a kid, or assumed I had in part as a kid. That was the absolute key turning point for me, I think.
You know, and it sounds so simple in some respects. And as another bloke as well, who's had to go through the similar journey of actually showing vulnerability and actually reconnecting back to yourself, it's so easy to shrug off and dismiss.
Yeah, and I think vulnerability for us is, you're feeling vulnerable. Like if you're in a rugby team or a boxing side, or you're in a work that's male dominated, you're feeling a bit vulnerable. Well, come on, mate, pick your act up. You're a big sook. Don't be a Sheila. All those sorts of things, which is that typical persona that we take. Being able to just look at it and go, you say what you like, but I'm going to deal with it. I think that's key for males.
Yeah, totally. Well, do you mind walking us back a bit through a little bit of your life journey and your story? Because even some of the things you've mentioned to me and the points here are very relatable. And I think if you're happy to share a little bit, especially when you were a kid as well. And
sure. So my early memories, I've got very early memories of childhood. We came from a military family. Dad was in the Air Force. His whole family were military. My mother's family were all military. So there was a very strict confines of that in the 70s. We travelled a lot. My early memories of school, or moving school every year, basically, from grade 1 to grade 5, I was in 7 different schools.
Wow.
And then obviously when I went to high school, I finally got my 8th school. So, I don't think many people do that, unless you obviously have in those sorts of environments. So I never really felt connected to any place or anyone. I never felt that safety net. I always felt like, any second now we're going to up and leave. I've just made all these friends. I made a bunch of friends. I'm about to leave. On top of that is moving into a different school. You can imagine what that was like. I had an older brother and younger brother. My older brother was a couple of years older than me, a couple of grades higher than me. So you're the new kids in the school. So you've got to prove yourself. You've got to, defend yourself. And then you've got to defend your brother because, the family thing and all that sort of stuff. That's why you're brought up. Look after your brother and look after your family. So every few years we were in a different school. So I always had that pick up and leave. And it was never that safety thing that we had. We were always moving and, very strict and very disciplinarian. My mother was a disciplinarian in our household. Dad was pretty cruisy. The old girl was pretty hard, pretty full on. So yeah, our whole life was revolved around up and leaving. So that I think over the years has had a lot to do with the way I feel today. And that safety net, or that not feeling grounded into one place, I felt right up until just recently. It was probably only, I reckon, 18 months ago that I actually unpacked the last box that I've been carrying around for 30 years.
Wow.
Full of Phantom magazines, of all things. I've collected Phantom magazines, and I finally unpacked it out of what it was and put it in another tub and said, right, it's stored. It's good to sit there now. So, and there was many times that I just throw things out. I can't carry that anymore. I've always thrown things out. So because I didn't know whether I was going to move. So there was that continual movement. And then when we finally did settle down, Dad left the military. We ended up in Brisbane. And when I was about 14, they split up. Mum and Dad split up, so the divorce happened. So I felt like that was a lot of my responsibility. Being the middle son, it sort of felt that I was the linchpin in it. So I took a lot of responsibility of that. I remember my mum walking out the first time going to stay with someone. I remember holding my dad. He's passed away now last year. I remember holding Dad and he was just crying. I'm thinking, I've got to stand here and look after my dad. I've got to support Dad. Mum came back into the house and Dad and I moved out. So it was that typical, leave home, mother makes you feel guilty, looking after Dad. I had a younger brother that was still at home with Mum. My older brother had shot through. He was up in North Queensland working. So there's all that instability. Your teenage boy growing up in that environment in those days. High school wasn't fun. I didn't, I had friends. I still never felt safe or connected to anyone. But underlying all the way through it, I always felt like that there was something else around me or with me. And then when I was about 15, I guess, I thought about committing suicide, which, you know, I sit back now and I go, I'm glad I never did that. That's it. But there was always that voice that said to me, there was always something sitting in the background guy that was always on my shoulder. So I remember absolutely vividly when you asked me, talking the other day, you asked me to have a think about things. I can remember vividly sitting in the kitchen, standing in the kitchen of Mum's kitchen. Mum was an exceptionally good cook, so the kitchen was always immaculate. And we had a marble cutting board, and I got this big old carver knife, and I was about to do the deed, and there's a voice on my shoulder said, don't do it. And I put it down, and my first instinct was, oh, if I do this, I'm going to make a mess, and I'm going to get in the shit from Mum for making a mess. That was my thought. So how bizarre is that? And then it went to who's going to look after Dad, who's going to live with Dad, who's going to look after my little brother if he has drama. I knew my older brother was okay, he was away. So at 15, I had that feeling, whatever sat on my shoulder, and I've sat with that ever since. So rolling from that, my high school days, finished that. And I think that's probably where I started to get that I don't care mentality. I used to say, look, don't care. I'd stuff something up. I get bad grades. I play a bad game of football. I do something wrong and I go, I don't care. And then I also grew this, which I've only realised in the last probably 6 months, this never look back attitude. If you stuff something up, just put it aside and forget about it. Don't worry about it. You know, deal with it later, whatever you have to do. And kept moving through life like that. You know, and that made me bounce through a lot of jobs and issues.
It's incredible, isn't it, that like I mentioned earlier before with hindsight, because we don't give appreciation or credit to some of our life's experiences, especially at a young age, and we don't appreciate the data and input that's doing to us at an unconscious level, and actually starting to shape the way we see the world and have these personality traits that actually can manifest out over time. And I think a lot of this work is having the awareness to start to look at those things with the wisdom and experience of life, and being able to start to look back and catch yourself in different, like you were saying, these personality traits and that. Because I remember you mentioned, you said in the retreat, you confessed that, you know, the first thing you do is when you walked in the room is you would scan the room, see where the safety exits are, see where everything is, and you're always in that protective place. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. And that was, you know, that was me admitting that in the retreat was a shocker. You know, because of how we grew up, and we're always in fight mode, and then I joined the police service in the early 90s, and that drilled it into me more about, you know, making sure you're protected, make sure you've scoped out everyone, who can you take out, who can you do this, how can you do that. That for me to just even let that out and not be feeling safe enough in that retreat that I could let that go a bit. That was huge. And that all came about from, you know, when I was a kid growing up, walking home from school and putting my back against the wall because there was 4 kids I knew that were going to fight us. You know, and it wasn't fair fights. It's that walking home with your brother and you know something's going to happen. So you always found a route that was safe. You'd find somewhere you can do whatever you had to do. So it's all those inputs that from your childhood that affect it.
It conditions you. And even within the police force, what was that like for you? Were there tough moments within the police force as well? Or
look, I think I'm pretty lucky. I found that after reading and finding out, I'm one of those people that sort of stuff didn't really bother. I saw some absolutely terrible things, like any frontline police officer, or my brother's a 35-year veteran of paramedic. Oh, wow. So what he's seen in his time, unbelievable. My cousin's Afghanistan vet. We've all seen stuff and we can all relate, but I don't think anything within the police service ever really triggered me, or, you know, I can't say I ever had PTSD. What I had was fully embedded in me like a tick well before I ever joined the coppers. All it did was made me make bad decisions, right. Prior to joining the police service.
Reinforced what was already there.
Exactly right. And I had this problem as a kid of not my mum being very authoritarian, I had issues around authority. I would always try and find ways of stirring teachers up and all those sorts of things. And that transferred from there to when I was working in pubs or when I was doing other jobs. And then when I went into the police service, I had run-ins with people who were of authority, because I just didn't want to, I didn't feel I needed to. I just wanted to run to the beat of my own drum, and you can't do that in those sorts of institutionalized type environments.
Totally.
But back to your question, did it ever affect me? Look, there was incidences there that I think about every now and then. Did I have the issues of some guys? No, I don't believe so. Like I said, I think it was embedded there, and it was just another phase of what I had to be and do to get to where, 20 odd years later, 27 years later, I'm finally in that place. The police service was leaving the police service when I just said, I've had enough. My heart wasn't in it anymore. I just couldn't understand the politics. And look, don't get me wrong, guy. I loved being a copper. I was really good at it. I had some great mates in there, but I just couldn't understand why, the court system is the way it was, and people within the job were jamming a knife into you and all those sorts of things. So I didn't have the heart to stay in there, and I was smart enough to see sergeants that had been in there for 20, 30 years who were just broken men, and I thought, no way am I going to sit there and be that. So that's why I sort of exited. And the beauty of that was my wife, her girlfriend at the time, wife now, she was doing naturopathy, so I was her guinea pig for acupuncture and drinking juiced cabbage. Never do that, by the way. All these other things. I was just a guinea pig, and I used to go, yeah, whatever. And she put me in touch. She and I went and saw a lady, because she said, I've got issues. I said, yep. And I went and saw a lady who used to do a lot of EFT, and she was a psychologist who was doing EFT back in the mid-90s. Wonderful lady. She was a Catholic nun. Just a lovely lady, and she's helped. I still see her today. I'll go and visit her. She's well into her 80s now, and we still visit, keep in touch. But she started the process. Found out that I was a vanishing twin. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, vanishing twin, back when, unbelievable, where in the womb there was 3 of us, and I was the one that survived. So there's, that was my guilt factor that I never knew about, which is resurfaced just recently. All those sorts of things that she started getting into. So I knew there was always things out there. It's just been a really, really long journey to get to the point.
It's incredible, mate. And what's coming through as clear to me is that there's always been a part of you that's been open to this work, by the sounds of it. But you've just, even back as a kid, and it's now allowing yourself to, like you said, have that vulnerability enough to be open and start to look at things from a different perspective to what you might have conditioned yourself to,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know what then decided for you, because I remember when you when I first came across you literally, if I recall, booked in for the retreat, booked in for the my program as well, and you just kind of just appeared, and you're like, right, I'm in, I'm booked, I'm all in. There was like this moment, no messing around,
Yeah. I'm a bit like that.
What happened? Fill me in. How did you get to that point?
Well, to 12 months prior to that, probably almost, again, March. It's almost been this March thing that's happened. A friend of mine who was in the police service passed away, and I met Sean O'Gorman. So you well know Sean. He and I have been mates ever since. Yeah. He's a bloody good bloke. He's and he and I are very similar personalities. He and I never met in the police service, but very similar personalities. Strong blokes who will step up for people and do what's got to be done. He and I got talking. We did a couple of, he came in with me and helped out with a self-defense seminars that we did. He helped on some special needs seminars. We were advocates for that. And during that process, he and I started talking, and he was helping me out. He helped me out a journal and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things he did is he put me in touch with a lady who just tore me apart. So it worked out this way that I was just happened to be talking to him. He said, you need to go and see this lady. And I said, oh, well, where is she? And he said, oh, she's in Newcastle. And sorry, mate, there's mozzies in this gym. And he said, oh, she's in Newcastle. can you get down there at some stage? I said, you wouldn't believe it, but I've just booked a flight to Newcastle this afternoon to go and do a job.
Wow.
He said, here's a number, go and see her. So I rang her straight on. She said, yeah, can you come at 5:30 tomorrow? So on that Thursday, the following day, worked all day, went and saw this lady, a very spiritual lady, and she just ripped me apart, mate. And I walked in there and I said, why are you here? And I said, my soul is tired. It's done. I've had enough. I'm just tired. So she tore me apart. She did stuff, talked around, what's happened in the past. And she was telling me things that I'm just going, there's no way in the world you can know that unless you tapped in something. And I was a blubbering mess when I left that. But it changed. So that sort of brought me into that real change of mindset.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks later, I had that moment where, I had another probably few months that I just kept tapping into stuff, and I started listening to your podcast a lot. And I was sort of putting my toe in there, and there was a lot of things going on. I was flying back and forth from Western Australia, so I was listening to a lot of things. Sean's podcast, yours, and just Joe Dispenza, all those sorts of things, just to get me to where I needed to be. And what that was doing to me is I was going, okay, now I'm getting this stuff. I understand there's a science behind it. I understand I can put the bricks in there now. Okay, I've had a bit of a base. I've built the base up a little bit. Now I understand how it's all sort of fallen together. And that transition from that point of March to the following March, where I had that full breakdown, I think that was sort of putting all those little bits and pieces in together for me to be able to, I don't think I probably could have done your stuff any time earlier. Then I had that breakdown in March last year, and the funny thing about how all that turned about is I've been listening to podcasts, and I am not terribly good with technology. The Bluetooth things don't work, and I was in the car, and it was probably the Wednesday after the big night out. The Wednesday after, and I was trying to get the Bluetooth to work, and I couldn't get the car going. It just all turned to crap for me. And then all of a sudden, your voice popped up, and it was a podcast. It was the beginning of a podcast, and it said, "The August retreat's coming up. I've got 3 or 4 more spots left." I got out of my car, walked upstairs into my office, and booked it.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there doing other stuff, and you and I back and forth a couple of times, and then I just joined the group, and I thought, well, I'm in. I'm just going to do it. I'm broken. I need to fix it. So let's get on with it. And that's how I got into your work. So, and it doesn't stop.
Amazing. And I remember vividly when you were in the program as well, because you can always tell when people join the initial 4-week program. There's some people that have just made a decision, they're in, and they're 1,000% in, and they're doing it. They follow, they're doing the meditations, they're following the dots, they're doing the work. Some people join, and I could just see with you, it's like, oh, I'm really keen to see where you go, mate. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't mind sharing the story as well, because I was thinking about this morning, and it made me laugh so hard when I first heard it. But do you mind sharing a little bit about when you first arrived at the retreat? So here's this, and you've been roomed with Chad?
Yeah, sure. So me being me, I being an ex-police officer and doing all those sorts of things, and I tried to tone myself down and understand that people are in the world and da. So I drive into the retreat and get in there, get out of the car, and I'm just wandering around, and I've walked in, and the first person I see is this big tall fella with a tie-dye shirt and yoga pants on. I went, oh, fucking hippies. Oh, I'm in a commune, for Christ's sakes. What have I done to myself? And I went, nah, let it roll. So we got upstairs. We went into where we were meeting, and then there was a bit of hugging going on. I went, oh, fucking hugging. What am I going to do now? So then cross the one. Next minute, when we sort ourselves out, I go in the room, and who's standing there? Jesus. So Chad to me looked like Jesus. I said, how you going, mate? I'm Brent, Chad. You know what? Since then, we've been very firm. He's down in Tasmania, I think, at the moment, last I met you. But what a great guy. What a great soul. He and I just hit it off. And it was like we're old mates. It was a strange thing that 2 people poles apart, and he's got a great story, that guy. He's got a fantastic story. And the way he's gone, I just love it. Just embrace it all. but yeah, we we ended up partnering up, and it was really good. It was good to have that rough-edged older bloke, and this, you know, very kind soul. And again, you throw a white robe on him, he could do any part in a nativity scene, I reckon.
Yeah, no, it tickled me no end, and it was just wonderful to see, and the relationships that come out of these events, you know, these retreats. It's like you say, you make friends for life, which is beautiful in the least expecting way. It's it's such a beautiful thing. So, do you mind, like, so you've been to the retreat now twice. You came back as well in January, and each time I've seen you come, you know, from the first time, not sure, and then coming back with more of almost, I don't know if determination was the right word, but it's almost like you've really started to get the hang of the work and the graft, and you're really open and you're willing to go there and fully open and surrender to it. So, how would you summarize your experiences over the 2 retreats so far? What have you learned, and what do you think has shifted for you, and the wisdom gleaned from it?
Well, the first one, I think that was the opening. That was me actually really letting that vulnerability go in a group of people I didn't know anything about, and just being that, just tapping in to try and be that person. You know, it was difficult for me, that first one. I was a blubbering mess for a lot of it. You know, things were popping up around people, and I couldn't control myself. You know, I've never cried like that. Am I ashamed of it? No way in the world. It was the best bloody thing that's happened to me in years. And the people I met in there, you know, connecting with those people was marvelous. So I think that first one was just the opening of let's call it the flower. So that the petals have started opening up. The second one was, when it first popped up for January, I thought about it and thought, no, should be right. I've got it all done. I'm all down. I'm embedded in. I can get on with the work. And I kept doing the work after it. You know, morning meditations, whatever I needed to do, the journaling, whatever I need to do. And then one day I was sitting there and I thought, nah, there's unfinished business here. And I don't know what it is. I've got no idea. All I know is I've got to go again to go and see what that is. And it was, again, I came in with that open mindset that I don't know what's going to go on. I'm not overly worried about it. I'll just let it roll. So the second one was a real, well, Matt said it to me at the end of the retreat. He said, you've really tapped in. So there was things that happened to me on the retreat that were just unbelievable, mind-blowing, life-changing. And it was that real tapping in that I can feel every day now. Like when you talk about heart center on the first one, and I came back from it and I'm thinking, oh, it was really hard to get in my heart center. It was hard to do meditation. It was hard to do things. After that second one, I drop in where I need to, whenever I need to. I just got to think of my heart, and it opens up to whatever it is I need to do. My decision-making processes after the second one are so different. Instead of shit days that I used to have for months or weeks or days, my shit moments are seconds, minutes. If they last for 2 hours, that's a big day. So, you know, it was that opening, and then I can relate to it. It was the opening, and then that second one was a real healing.
Yeah, incredible.
And even those words came to me in one of the in the group intention.
Yeah.
Where it rained. That word came to me during some of Matt's work. It kept saying heal, 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 and then in that group intention, this big voice said healed, and I went, well, there you go.
Wow.
And then we went and jumped in the water.
When we experienced rain for the first time in God knows how long, which was a magic moment.
Yes. Yeah. And the funniest thing was how Meg said, can we ask for rain? And what happened? 40 minutes later. Unbelievable.
That's right. Yeah. The intention. Do you get people asking you about the work at all and your experiences? And what do you generally say to people that are on the outside looking in?
Look, I'm quite free in explaining what I've done. I'm quite happy to tell, people in the gym or people we're out with that I don't have a fear of it. I don't have a fear of the work. If you had asked me 12 months ago, I would have said, no, I'm not talking about that woo-woo stuff. Now I'm happy to talk about it to anyone and anyone. I think it's important that if you're going to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk.
Totally.
There's no point in me going and doing all this work that I've done and being a different person and making sure I'm in my heart if I'm not willing to share it with somebody else who at that time may need it. They may not need it, but more often than not, it may be those words that I speak to someone and tell them how I've been to 2 retreats and how I do this and how I do that and how it's changed my life. That may affect someone indirectly or directly. Maybe that person goes home and tells their husband or their son, the boxing coach told me about this. That's how I see it. So if you don't, you've got to be vocal about it, I think.
And it's coming back to that vulnerability, right?
Exactly. Every time I say that, I'm vulnerable about what I'm saying, and people pick up on that. People resonate with those sorts of things. So and they wouldn't be standing you having those sort of conversations unless they were willing to hear something.
Yeah.
And we've spoken about that in the past, and
Yeah. Well, nothing made me more happier when I spoke to you a few weeks back, and you said, "Guy, I'm finally walking away from my job and stepping full time into your gym as a coach and running the gym as well." I mean, that's just phenomenal. As far as I'm concerned, that's fully coming from the heart, and really starting to align back what you're passionate about.
Yeah, and credit to you about that, because when I was working down in Byron Bay just recently, we caught up just before Christmas. We were talking about being vulnerable to certain things and learning your lessons. And we were talking about the lessons around business partners, and the lesson was, I was trying like the blazes to work out what the lesson was that I was trying to learn from my business partner, because at that time I was really close to moving on. And I thought, no, I'll give this I'll keep this business going and keep going at it hard, because we've got to feed families and all that sort of stuff. And you and I were talking, and you said something to me that your greatest lesson was to live from your experience was to live from the heart and make that decision from the heart. And right at that moment, I was driving home, and it's the whole way home I've got that feeling, and I thought, no, that's it, I'm done. Come March, heaven or high water, I'm done. So that's what we did. I started playing it, and I just left it to the universe to deal with, and this is where I am.
And how has it been going for you so far?
Fantastic. We're lucky that because I've got a business partner, Julie, who used to work for me in my other business. She left the business and started in the boxing club. We're lucky that we've got a community around us that love what we do. And that makes it so much easier. We've got kids, we've got adults. I run women's self-defense courses through another friend of mine. What we do makes a difference, and that makes me happy. So, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do my meditations and come and do a gym class, that's easy compared to having to deal with what I used to deal with.
Yeah.
So, it's easy.
It's special, isn't it? There's nothing, it's like I was saying to you, so my day's been massive already. I was up not long after 4 because we had to get ready for a webinar we ran in Europe for Live and Flow this morning for our Portugal retreat. And it's been weeks of preparation and early morning starts because Petra's in Croatia, where we have a 6 a.m. meeting. And then my day starts and floods in. I've got 2 workshops coming up the weekend. It sometimes gets just, it's on. When it's on, it's on. But at the same time, when you're aligned with something you're so passionate about and you feel like you're contributing and making a difference, it doesn't feel like work anymore. And I think I just wish more people would experience that and have the courage to step into their heart and start to listen to that aspect of ourselves and learn these tools and techniques that really help you overcome your own barriers and your own belief systems and the things that are holding us back, that influence us in certain ways. Because I think that gift is within all of us. We just got to learn how to tap into it.
Yeah, and I think also not being afraid to take the time out for yourself, even in a crap day or even in a busy day. Like today's one of our heavy days. Our kids start rolling in at 3:45. come 2:30, I'll sit down for 20 minutes and I'll meditate. And if I drop off, I drop off. But I wake up and I'm energized and I'm ready to rock and roll. Taking those times, I do it all the time. If I'm not feeling 100%, if I'm feeling a little bit weary or I'm you're just feeling that little bit off, I take the time to just sit and get back with yourself. I can't remember the name of the guy that you had him on the podcast a while back, and he said, doobie or whatever it was.
Amit Goswami.
I think of that all the time. Like I got a work ability that I can go 72 hours if I have to, but I also like sitting back now and going, I'll just be here for a minute.
Yeah.
I'll have a cup of coffee and ponder my navel. Fantastic. That does me. And then I'm good. I'm good for another 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I got Amit coming back on actually next month in May, hopefully. Last question for you. For people that might be right now driving their car, they're listening to this, they might have been listening to my podcast for the last 6 months or whatever, and they're contemplating this work. There's obviously anticipation, fears, questions around it. What would you say to somebody now listening to this right now, that's in that place on the fence?
Be vulnerable. I don't care what anyone says. If you're vulnerable, you will open up a lot of things. I think that's the key. And when that vulnerability is there, take action on it. Don't be afraid to step into that void. Don't be afraid of doing that, because, and we've talked about this before, and you talked about it with Sean on the podcast with him a while back. People are happy with the pain that they're in, rather than the pain that of doing this work. I'm glad I've been through the pain that I've been through for the last 2 years, because I don't see it as pain anymore. I see it as opportunity and growth, and the ability to now move on with my next 40 years as a different person. I thank that past. I appreciate that past. I'm responsible for that past. However, take action so that you can move on with your life and be a better person. And then an old boxing analogy, keep getting up. The human body can take so much. You talk about homeostasis, how tough are we to spend 40 odd years getting the piss and pick handles knocked out of you? Failure, guilt, shame, all those sorts of things, but we keep getting up. So one day when you get up, you're going to be a better person. I tell kids every time they walk out the doors of our gym, you've just got a little bit better. You've just got a little bit better. This work doesn't stop, as we've talked about.
Totally.
But every time you do a little bit, every time you have a meditation, and it might be a really crap one, but something spikes, and then 2 days later something gets released. Keep getting up off the floor, keep getting up off the canvas, keep doing the work, and it makes a huge difference. There's probably something I want to relate after that last the last retreat. I came home. I was going to go paddleboarding down the Coolangatta, and it was shut and it was blowing a gale. I thought, no, I'll just go home to the girls. And this is about taking that responsibility and moving things. So, as you well know, I did a little bit extra with Petra at one stage, and you came up behind me, and thanks for that. I felt somebody there, so you held the space. And what came out of that was resentment. So I've been holding on to that resentment for, I'm nearly 50, for 49 plus years. And I knew that was something there, and that was me getting up off the canvas all the time and saying, rightio, what's this thing, until it finally came out. And it came out in a big way. Then I went home and I told my girls, the first retreat, I didn't really tell my wife and daughter what went on. The second retreat, I sat them down and I went through the whole gamut. I explained everything to them. But I also explained to them that I had resentment for my wife for many years. I said, and I apologised for that, because that was resentment that neither of them deserved or warranted. It was just me from my past. Again, that was me getting up off the canvas and taking responsibility and saying sorry to my wife. And then I said to my daughter, I don't know if I've ever been resentful to you. I may have done it subconsciously or whatever, but I apologise. Again, that's getting up off the canvas, taking responsibility for what you've done, and letting those two women know who are a pivotal part in my life, that it's okay. I'm a different person, and our household is so different compared to my wife. Always said on a Sunday she always knew when Sunday was there because the house would get prickly, and I'd fire up getting ready for work. I'd get in fight mode. We don't have that anymore in our house. Why? Because I was vulnerable. I took action. I was responsible for what I've done, and I keep getting up.
Brent, that is amazing to hear, mate. Honestly, I think every man out there needs to hear that right now. Thank you for sharing that, mate. I really appreciate it. I think that's a perfect note to end this conversation on. Brent, I just want to honor you and commend you for your enthusiasm for this work and what you've brought to us, and the energy at the retreats, and everything you do, and actually coming on the podcast today and speaking from the heart. It's greatly appreciated. This podcast will reach thousands of people moving forward. And I've no doubt anyone that's still listening right now would definitely appreciate what you shared today as well. So, mate, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do, and your mad mate Matt and Petra. Without you three and all the collective of both of those retreats and all the people who've been involved in this, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So thanks, mate.
You're very welcome. Thanks, buddy.